You wake up and the first thing your hand reaches for is not water, not a journal, but the cold, glowing screen beside your pillow. Before your mind is even awake, you're already scrolling, chasing that tiny rush from each new post, each notification ping. A quick laugh, a flash of envy, a moment of distraction, then it fades and you're left empty again. The day barely begins and already you feel behind, restless, pulled in 100 directions by things that don't matter. This isn't weakness or lack of willpower. This is the cheap dopamine trap quietly wrapping chains around your attention, your time, and your soul. The ancient Stoics never saw smartphones, but they perfectly described the danger. Pleasures that arrive too easily and cost too much. Right now, more than ever, these cheap hits are controlling your mind. But the power to break free still belongs to you. If these words reach something true inside you, smash that like button right now to mark your decision to fight back. Subscribe and turn on notifications so we walk this stoic path together, step by disciplined step. Let's go deeper. Number 1, what cheap dopamine really is. Cheap dopamine is the fast, effortless pleasure your brain gets from things designed to hijack it. Endless scrolling, sugary snacks, short videos, porn tabs, constant alerts buzzing in your pocket. Your brain releases this chemical to reward behaviors that once helped humans survive, like finding food or safety. But today companies have turned it into an infinite slot machine. The hit feels rewarding for seconds, sometimes less, yet trains you to crave more of the same shallow stimulation. Real satisfaction, the kind that lasts, comes from effort, building something meaningful, reading a difficult book, training your body until it hurts, having honest conversations that demand courage. Cheap dopamine gives you none of that depth. Instead, it leaves you hungrier, more agitated, more disconnected from yourself with every swipe or bite. Marcus Aurelius saw this pattern centuries ago when he warned against anything that makes the governing self soft and servile. The trap works through escalation. What excited you last month now barely registers, so you hunt stronger, faster, louder versions of the same thing. Your natural baseline of contentment drops lower and lower until ordinary life, silence, focused work, a slow walk, feels painfully boring. This is not an accident. Algorithms study your every click and serve exactly what keeps you hooked longest. You become a passenger in your own mind, reacting instead of choosing. Epictetus taught that real freedom is not getting everything you want, but ruling your wants so they don't rule you. When cheap dopamine runs the show, that freedom disappears, and you live as a slave to impulses disguised as harmless fun. The first act of rebellion is simply to see it for what it is. Number 2, how it quietly controls your mind. Cheap dopamine never announces itself with trumpets. It slips in through small promises of relief from boredom, from loneliness, from the discomfort of being alone with your thoughts. Each tiny hit teaches your brain that discomfort can be escaped instantly, so you lose the muscle of sitting still and facing reality as it is. Attention becomes a fragile thing, shattered every few seconds by the urge to check, to refresh, to escape into something easier. Deep, deliberate thought requires sustained focus, but you have trained yourself to crave constant novelty instead. Important work starts to feel almost physically painful because it lacks the instant reward loop you've grown addicted to over months and years. Seneca described people who lived only for the next meal, the next show, the next fleeting pleasure, calling them slaves in golden chains. Replace show with real or feed, and the diagnosis remains exactly the same today. Procrastination grows from this soil. You know what deserves your energy: exercise, learning, mending relationships, but the brain screams for the path of least resistance. Just 5 more minutes becomes hours stolen from your future self. Emotionally, the damage deepens. Short manic highs followed by long troughs of emptiness, anxiety about missing out, comparison that poisons gratitude. Stoics insisted peace lives inside, independent of external triggers. When you chase cheap dopamine to fill inner voids, that peace moves further out of reach every day. Number 3. The ancient Stoic view on pleasure and distraction. The Stoics never rejected pleasure itself. They rejected the tyranny of pleasure over reason and character. Epictetus drew a sharp line. Some things are up to us, our judgments, our choices, our discipline, while others, including runaway desires, are not. Once cheap pleasures take the driver's seat, they stop being choices and start being masters. Seneca explained that nature wisely attaches pleasure to necessary actions, eating when hungry, resting when tired, so we survive. But humans pervert this system, chasing pleasure for its own sake until it becomes an end instead of a byproduct. The wise person lets pleasure arrive naturally after doing what is right, never pursuing it directly. Marcus Aurelius deliberately chose simple food, cold water, plain clothing, uncomfortable beds. Not because he hated comfort, but because he knew overindulgence dulls perception and weakens resolve. Voluntary discomfort was his daily training to keep the mind sharp and sovereign. Early Stoics like Zeno placed self-mastery at the center of the good life. Without it, every virtue crumbles. Distractions were not innocent. They were active enemies of wisdom, pulling the soul away from its proper work. The mind, they said, should be a fortified citadel, open to guests but never surrendered to invaders. That teaching crosses centuries unchanged. The tools may look different now, but the weakness they exploit is the same human one. Number 4. The high cost to your life and character. The price of cheap dopamine is paid first in focus. Sustained, creative, high-value work requires long stretches of unbroken attention, but constant switching trains your brain to expect change every few seconds. Deep skills atrophy, ideas stay shallow, projects die unborn because boredom arrives faster than progress. Relationships suffer next. Real presence becomes rare when half your mind is waiting for the next ping or like. Conversations turn superficial. Comparisons replace connection. Intimacy fades under the weight of curated online lives that make reality feel inadequate. Physically, the body pays too. Sleep shredded by blue light and late-night scrolling, energy sapped by neglected movement, brain fog thickening from overstimulation. Stoics viewed body and soul as inseparable partners. Injure one and the other limps. Purpose itself begins to erode when every goal demands delayed gratification while every habit rewards immediacy. Big dreams feel distant and pointless next to the small, reliable comfort of another video or snack. Spiritually, the deepest wound appears. Tranquility, the Stoic ideal of a mind undisturbed, gets replaced by inner chaos. Mood swings dictated by external triggers instead of internal command. Number 5. Breaking free. Practical Stoic steps to reclaim your mind. Begin with voluntary discomfort every single day to rebuild tolerance for reality without crutches. Skip the morning scroll completely. Leave the phone in another room for the first hour after waking. Sit in silence for 10 minutes and simply observe thoughts without chasing them. Walk outside without earbuds or screen. Feel boredom rise and let it pass without escape. This is not punishment. This is strength training for the mind, exactly as Marcus practiced cold baths and plain meals. Each small refusal weakens the grip of cheap dopamine and strengthens your sovereignty. Next, engineer your environment so virtue is easy and vice is hard. Delete apps or hide them in folders that require effort to reach. Use strict time limits on social platforms. 15 minutes total per day, enforced by tools if necessary. Keep the phone out of the bedroom so sleep is protected. Place books, journals, workout clothes where you cannot avoid them. Friction is your ally against impulse. Convenience is the enemy of discipline. Replace cheap hits with worthy effort that pays better dopamine, slow, earned, lasting. Read demanding books that force concentration. Train your body until muscles burn. Write thoughts that require honesty instead of likes. Every evening, perform the Stoic review without mercy or excuse. Ask, what mastered me today? Which impulses did I obey? Where did I trade long-term good for short-term relief? Then set one clear intention for tomorrow. Today, I will rule my attention in this specific way. When the craving strikes during the day, pause and label it dispassionately. This is just dopamine hunting novelty again. Watch the urge rise, crest, and fade like weather moving through the sky. Epictetus reminded us that nothing external harms us. Only our rushed opinions about it do. Finally, measure every choice by virtue. Does this action grow wisdom, courage, justice, self-control? Align with nature's rational order, and freedom follows naturally. You are not condemned to this trap. Start with one reclaimed moment today, then another. Your mind is still yours. Take it back. Number 6, why cheap dopamine feels so good and why that's the problem. The reason cheap dopamine feels irresistible is because it mimics the reward system nature gave us for survival. Finding food, escaping danger, connecting with others, all triggered a burst of pleasure to keep us alive. Today, every swipe or notification hijacks that ancient wiring, delivering the same chemical reward without any real effort or risk. It feels like a gift, a quick fix for boredom or stress, and your brain happily labels it as good. But the Stoics understood that anything that arrives too easily often costs more than it gives. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should suspect pleasures that come without struggle, because they soften us and make us dependent. When a reward requires no work, it trains us to avoid work. The mind begins to associate effort with pain and ease with happiness, reversing the natural order. What was once a tool for motivation becomes a chain around our freedom. The pleasure is real, but it is borrowed against our future self. The trap deepens because the brain adapts fast. Each hit raises the threshold for what feels good, so yesterday's excitement becomes today's minimum. You chase higher doses, more extreme content, stronger flavors, more intense stimulation. Yet satisfaction never returns. Seneca called this the empty pleasure that leaves the soul hungrier. The more you feed it, the more it demands, until ordinary life feels colorless. This cycle creates a false sense of control. You think you're choosing the next video or snack, but the choice is driven by craving, not reason. Epictetus would say you're not choosing at all. You're being chosen by your lower impulses. True control comes when you can look at a pleasure and decide whether it serves your higher purpose or merely your temporary comfort. The deepest danger is that cheap dopamine quietly replaces genuine meaning. Moments of real joy, mastering a skill, helping someone, standing in silence under the stars, require patience and effort. But cheap hits arrive instantly, so the mind prefers them and slowly forgets how to wait. Over time, you lose the ability to experience the slower, richer pleasures that actually build a life worth living. Breaking this illusion starts with gratitude for discomfort. When boredom or restlessness arrives, welcome it as a teacher instead of an enemy. The Stoics knew that every moment you resist the cheap hit is a victory that strengthens your soul. Over time, the mind relearns that true good feels different, calmer, deeper, more lasting, and the cheap version loses its power. Number 7, how cheap dopamine steals your future. Every time you give in to a cheap dopamine hit, you are borrowing time and energy from tomorrow. The hours spent scrolling or binge-watching are not neutral. They're investments in a weaker version of yourself. The Stoics taught that time is the only resource we cannot replace. Yet we trade it away for fleeting sensations without a second thought. Seneca reminded us that we are not short of time, we are short of focus. When attention is fragmented by constant rewards, the future self receives a scattered, exhausted version of you. Big goals, learning a language, building a business, becoming physically strong, require thousands of consistent, unglamorous hours. Cheap dopamine trains us to avoid those hours, so dreams stay dreams. The damage compounds quietly. One skipped workout, one ignored book, one postponed conversation seems small today, but multiplied over months and years, it creates a life of regret. Marcus Aurelius reflected daily on death to keep perspective. If today were your last, would you waste it on another reel? Most of us would not, yet we do. This theft is invisible because cheap dopamine feels harmless in the moment. It promises just a break, but the break becomes the default state. Your potential shrinks not from dramatic failure, but from thousands of tiny surrenders. The Stoics called this living as if tomorrow were guaranteed, forgetting that every day is borrowed. Emotionally, the future pays too. When you train your mind for instant gratification, patience and resilience disappear. Setbacks feel unbearable because you have lost the habit of enduring. Relationships suffer when you choose quick entertainment over presence and effort. The life you build is the sum of what you choose daily. Reclaiming your future begins with one simple rule. Never let the easy choice win without a fight. Before you act, ask, will my future self thank me for this? The answer is almost always clear. Each time you choose the harder path, you pay a deposit into the bank of a stronger, freer, more fulfilled life. Number 8, the social media algorithm as the modern slave master. Social media platforms are not neutral tools. They are engineered to exploit your dopamine system with perfect precision. Every feature, endless scroll, autoplay, likes, streaks, notifications, is designed to keep you engaged longer than you intend. The algorithm knows your weaknesses better than your closest friends do. These companies profit when you stay hooked, so they serve exactly what triggers your strongest cravings: outrage, comparison, novelty, validation. The Stoics would recognize this as a new form of external control, something outside your power that tries to dictate your thoughts and actions. Epictetus would ask, who is the master here? You or the feed? The result is a mind that belongs to strangers. Your mood rises and falls with likes. Your opinions shift with trending topics. Your attention is sold to the highest bidder. True freedom, the Stoics said, is ruling yourself regardless of what others do or say. When an algorithm decides what you see and when you see it, that freedom is gone. What makes it worse is the illusion of choice. You think you're browsing freely, but the content is curated to maximize your time on the platform. The more you engage, the more accurately it predicts your next urge. You become predictable, manipulable, and, worst of all, addicted to the very thing that weakens you. Seneca warned against becoming a spectator of life instead of a participant. Today, most of us are spectators of other people's curated lives, comparing our behind the scenes to their highlight reels. The comparison poisons gratitude and fuels endless chasing for more likes, more followers, more validation. To break free, treat the algorithm as an enemy that must be starved. Limit exposure ruthlessly. Use it only for specific purposes, then leave. The less data you give it, the less power it has. Reclaim your attention, and you reclaim your life. Number 9, rebuilding the mind through daily Stoic practices. The mind that has been softened by cheap dopamine can be strengthened again, but only through deliberate, repeated practice. The Stoics built their character the same way athletes build muscle, through consistent discomfort and reflection. Start small, but start today. Begin each morning with intention. Before touching your phone, sit quietly and decide what kind of person you will be today. Write one sentence. Today I will practice self-control in this specific way. Marcus Aurelius began every day reminding himself that people would act foolishly, yet he would remain calm. Set your own anchor before the world pulls you away. Throughout the day, practice the pause. When the urge to check your phone or eat mindlessly arises, stop for 10 seconds. Breathe. Ask, is this necessary? Is this virtuous? Most urges fade when examined. Epictetus taught that freedom lies in the space between stimulus and response. Train its space to grow wider. End each day with a review. Look back honestly. What did I trade long-term good for short-term pleasure? What can I improve tomorrow? Write it down without self-judgment. This evening practice turns every day into a lesson, slowly rewiring your habits. Incorporate voluntary discomfort daily. Cold showers, fasting from screens, walking without music, eating simple food. These small acts remind your mind that pleasure is not required for happiness. Each refusal weakens the grip of cheap dopamine and builds inner strength. Finally, seek out worthy challenges that demand effort and patience. Read difficult books, learn a skill, help others without reward. These activities release deeper, more satisfying dopamine, the kind that comes from mastery and contribution. Over time, your brain learns to prefer the real thing over the cheap imitation. Number 10. Living as a free man in a world of slaves. The ultimate goal of Stoicism is to live free, not from hardship, but from slavery to desires. In a world engineered to keep you chasing cheap dopamine, choosing freedom is an act of quiet rebellion. You become the rare person who rules himself instead of being ruled. True freedom shows in small moments. When you can sit in silence without reaching for your phone, when you can say no to a craving without anger, when you can face discomfort with calm acceptance. Seneca said the wise man is happy even in poverty or exile because his mind is his own. This freedom spreads to every area of life. Relationships become deeper because you give full presence. Work becomes meaningful because you focus without distraction. Health improves because you choose what nourishes the body and soul. Purpose returns because you pursue what matters, not what distracts. The world will keep offering cheap pleasures, louder and faster than ever, but you no longer need them. You have tasted something better, self-command, tranquility, a life aligned with nature and reason. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, flourishing that no algorithm can touch. Others will notice the change. They will see calm where they expect restlessness, focus where they expect distraction, contentment where they expect endless wanting. Your example becomes a quiet invitation for them to question their own chains. You do not need to change the world. You only need to change yourself. Start with one moment of resistance today, then another. Each victory builds the life of a free person. The cheap dopamine trap is powerful, but your will is stronger. Choose freedom. Choose yourself. Choose now. You now see the trap clearly. A modern world engineered to keep you chasing shadows of pleasure while your real life slips quietly past. The cheap dopamine hits that once felt like rewards have revealed themselves as thieves, stealing your focus, your time, your peace, and worst of all, your sovereignty over your own mind. But recognition is not the end. It is only the beginning. The Stoics never promised the path would be easy. They promised it would be true. Every impulse you refuse, every moment of boredom you endure, every deliberate choice to do the harder thing instead of the easier one is you quietly taking back what was stolen. Freedom is not found in having no cravings. It is found in no longer being ruled by them. Remember this above all. You are not broken, and you are not weak. You are human, living in an age that has weaponized the oldest human weakness with terrifying precision. Yet the same nature that made you vulnerable also gave you reason, the one faculty no algorithm can touch and no notification can drown out. Epictetus said the chief task in life is to distinguish what is yours from what is not. Your judgments, your choices, your discipline, These belong to you alone. Everything else is borrowed scenery. When you stop bargaining with cheap pleasures and start training your will the way Marcus trained his body, something remarkable happens. The world keeps offering the same distractions, but they lose their grip. The chains rust. The pull weakens. You begin to feel what real tranquility is, not the absence of desire, but the presence of self-command. Start today, not with grand gestures, but with one small, definite act of resistance. Leave the phone in another room for the first hour after waking. Sit in silence when the restlessness rises. Choose the book over the feed, the walk over the scroll, the honest conversation over the curated highlight reel. Each victory, no matter how small, deposits strength into the account of your character. Over weeks, over months, these deposits compound into a life that feels solid, purposeful, and free. You will not become immune to temptation, but you will become its master instead of its servant. That is the Stoic promise, and it has never been more relevant than right now. If these words have stirred something real inside you, make it count. Hit that like button to seal your intention. Subscribe and turn on notifications so we keep walking this path together. Drop one specific action you're taking today in the comments below. Let the community witness your first step and hold you to it. You are not alone in this fight. And you are far stronger than the trap wants you to believe. The mind is yours. Reclaim it. Live accordingly. Stay disciplined. Stay free.